Yeah, I think it just takes longer for the YouTube stream to actually go live, and that's why there's a bigger delay. Because I can see when it's like it says sending data, and then I'll say streaming, and Twitch always pops up before YouTube does.
Yeah, I think there's just like a slight delay.
I think they probably purposely do that because they want to run smoother. I do feel like YouTube streams typically are a lot smoother than Twitch.
Yeah, you sound good there. I'm gonna do it anyway. Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Good on Twitch. Good on YouTube.
You ready to get started?
Sir.
Hello and welcome to episode 218 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we have the absolutely biggest news in Ego Chall Podcast history. So much so that I can barely even speak. We also have a roster change in the CDL. We have Activision being weird once again. And we have a few other things to talk about as well as the upcoming week of Call of Duty League matches. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yep, doing all right. Like you said, I actually, jokes aside, we actually have a decent amount of news to discuss in comparison to some of these other weeks where we're doing our preview show for the weeks ahead. So pretty excited about that, and some weird stuff to discuss, but also some uh, eventful news and whatnot. So ready to go for it.
This is no joke, though. I don't know what you're talking about with these jokes. The news is that we at the Ego Chow podcast have seen OpTic's video about the news, and I was overwhelmed by the reaction. So that was my news. I think that accounts for the biggest news in Ego Chow podcast history, does it not?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone saw OpTic's whole debacle this week with this first initial tweet of a picture of Shotzi in a suit and in a black and white setting or whatever technical term is for the photography stuff. Um, in hindsight now, after the fact, it makes perfect sense why he was wearing a suit because it turned out that it's a new show they were trying to hype up. Um, in you know, I in the moment, I definitely thought it was a little strange and wasn't a huge fan of it myself personally, just because it wasn't my type of humor. It was basically like kind of making fun of Shotzi just because he's pretty stupid and like I always joke with Tremy about it. Like, if this guy wasn't like phenomenal at Call of Duty and really good at Call of Duty games, like what would you be doing in life? And it's that's kind of the show is like making fun of his like lack of knowledge and certain basic topics and whatnot. So, it is what it is. I think end of the day there were some strange reactions from people who were like expecting Shotzi to retire, which I can get why you might have thought that, but obviously that's what OpTic was playing into, and it got them to get their views and whatnot. So, it is what it is at the end of the day. I will be interested to see if this actually is something that like OpTic carries out, like and does multiple episodes of or whatnot. Because if it was like a one-time thing and they just did the tweet for the video, that seems really weird to me. But uh, yeah, despite what OpTic's YouTube title for that breaking news would suggest, it wasn't actually the biggest news in OpTic history.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand how people like if it was just Shotzi sitting in his jersey in that picture, then I could kind of understand like something kind of big coming, but him in a suit and him like he just looks so uncomfortable and unnatural. It made me, and I told you this, I think, I don't know if we were actually on the air when I said it, but I thought it might have been like Shotzi becoming a minority owner
Yeah.
of OpTic and kind of playing into like, now I'm a businessman kind of thing. I thought that was the most realistic possibility. Not that he was announcing his retirement, because if he announces like he's going to retire at the end of the season and he does it and they tease it, I guess, with him wearing a suit, somebody needs to get put in like the back of a van and get beat up with a bag of hammers. Like there's just there's no way that you can hype it up as kind of a joke, kind of like meme format, and then actually drop something serious and say, yeah, like after the season, Shotzi's gonna retire and he's gonna become just a full-time content creator within OpTic. I think that would have been a big mistake.
But now OpTic have, thinking about this right now for the first time, they have set themselves up. We've talked about this multiple times now, like how it feels like Shotzi and Dashi, especially after the whole Rambo versus Dashi saga, it feels like Dashi and Shotzi are both like OpTic for life until one of them retires or decides to leave on their own. Like they're basically there for the long haul now. So whenever Shotzi does end up retiring, assuming it is with OpTic, they can just like tweet that picture again, and everyone will be like, "Oh, it's not going to be anything serious. It's just going to be, a funny joking bit," and then it'll actually be the retirement video. That would be a kind of funny like 360 or full circle moment.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense from their perspective. Is like, why would you leave OpTic for really any reason, unless OpTic just doesn't want to be in Call of Duty, or they don't have any plans to field a competitive team. And I would imagine if you have Shotzi and Dashi on your team, then you're trying to field a competitive team. So, and then on top of that, OpTic's the most popular and like most widely seen team. So I don't think that there's even like a real traditional sports equivalent, at least in America, because your beloved New York Yankees, like they don't have like a stranglehold on Major League Baseball like the same way, or the Dodgers, even like coming off of back-to-back championships. It's not like that's like the only team that really matters in MLB, and there's no equivalent like in the NFL or NBA, like even the Lakers or Knicks. Like it just doesn't have that. Maybe there is in soccer, but I feel like it's just too spread out. But like in Call of Duty, it's OpTic, and then a ton of space, and then you get to FaZe, LAT, and the like. So yeah, I don't know whether this is going to be a long-term thing. I won't be watching, so I don't really give a shit one way or the other. But I wish all the best to Shotzi and Dautouche. I've seen his name on Twitter, but I actually don't know how to actually say it. But yeah, that was the biggest news in Ego Chall podcast history. I have fucked that line up 3 straight times. That is so annoying. I'm just gonna move on. The actual probably biggest news of the week in terms of the CDL though was that Capsidal has rejoined the Call of Duty League. He has returned. He is joining the Vancouver Surge in place of Abe. That was actually first leaked by the Bush again, which I actually love. That is a running bit that they're just, anytime that they get poached, they just like, all right, we're leaking your roster change right now. So get ready. So Bush put out a tweet just kind of like congratulating. I'm having a really bad, this has been 9 minutes into the live stream, probably 7 into the actual show, and I have fumbled over my words like half a dozen times. We're on for a great show. But yeah, Cap going to Vancouver. Bush leaked it. Vancouver, I believe, confirmed all of the news, which, I mean, once, if they haven't,
They confirmed Abe leaving.
I will forgo this opportunity to rant about Call of Duty League teams and their Twitter accounts. I will forgo this opportunity, but it is all but confirmed by Vancouver. Everybody is saying that he's going to be there. I would imagine even if Cap was streaming, it would be streaming with the Vancouver guys. Like, it's very obvious that Capsidal has made his return to the CDL, and he'll officially make his return this weekend with Vancouver. We hadn't actually gotten a leak of this or anything. I know you'd been saying last week when Spart was when he went to Boston, how Bush was probably very happy that Capsidal in particular had not been poached. And then a week later, this happens. He goes to the Surge. So what do you think about this move with Cap coming in and Abe going out?
Yeah, so just looking at the Surge's Twitter account, they tweeted 21 hours ago that they confirmed the departure of Abe, and the tweet before that is retweeting the Bush's tweet announcing Capsidal to Surge, and they just did "I call Cap" with the hat emoji. So it is not official from Vancouver, but as you said, I do think it is very funny that like the Bush is just like announcing these moves and seemingly not even like, I mean, if they are talking about it with these other teams, they just clearly don't care or whatever. Like it's like there's no coordinated effort to get the announcement on the
No.
same page or anything, and I think that's to the Bush's benefit in terms of if these other teams like Vancouver clearly is in no rush to announce it, like Bush is going to do it immediately, get that social media juice and whatnot, and I think that's good for them. I do, you know, while we're on the Bush, I think I am slightly worried um about this move in terms of what it could mean for the Bush's success for the rest of this year. Not, I think Abe has just had a really tough time in the CDL this year. Could be a result of the team he was on in the CDL, and multiple other factors, obviously. But just based on his statistical performance, I've seen a ton of people tweeting like he had like the 53rd or the 54th worst KD in the CDL this year, which notably the CDL only has 48 starters. So when you're getting into the 50s, you're getting into the territory of people who played and were released already or have only recently joined and struggled themselves in a small sample size. So for somebody to have that statistical presence after being a starter for the full season up to this point, that is sort of worrying. But at the same time, we did see Abe's potential at the end of last season at EWC. So I do think, maybe like a fresh start could be good for him. But in terms of the Bush specifically, I think Capsidal and Spart were by far the best two players on that team, and now both of them are gone. I know, obviously, I've been a big proponent of Gig Awake in the past, so I'm happy Awakening is there, but um, I'm just not sure what this means for the Bush's success, which the Bush have had a lot of success in challengers so far. So does a roster move like this, if the team doesn't continue to win, how does that impact the Bush and Barstool and that whole crew's thoughts on continuing to compete in Call of Duty and all that. So that's my big picture thought for the Bush is what these moves mean for potential uh you know the Bush potentially continuing in Call of Duty beyond this season and whatnot. So definitely slightly worried about that if these like new pickups don't continue to see the success that the first iterations of the Bush roster have. But in terms of Capsidal and the Vancouver Surge, super happy for Cap. Um, like you said, I thought when there was the whole thing last week with the owners meeting video from Bush, I thought if anyone was going to get picked up right away, it was going to be Cap because I felt like he was by far the best player on that team so far this year. Um, Given the circumstances of the teams picking him up and whatnot, like the Spark move to Boston made sense, and we've already seen that pay early dividends. Same sort of thing here. Like it even makes sense further for Vancouver to reunite Capsidal with TJ, who were a part of Bush early this season before TJ went to Vancouver. So they have a sub duo who have had early success working together in this game in challengers. And then you pair that AR duo with Lunars and Gwen, who we talked about last week. It looked like last week was the first time in a bit that Gwen started to pick things up a little bit, even if it came at the expense of Lunars not having his greatest statistical performances in recent weeks. So we'll be interested to see how this team functions. I'm just end of the day happy Cap's back in the CDL. Hope he makes the most of this opportunity, and we'll see how it goes.
I do think, I'm not gonna shit on Capsidal, and obviously, like when you perform as well as he has in challengers this season, then that typically will necessitate you coming back up to the CDL at some point. I will say though that it further proves how flawed Vancouver's strategy was to begin this season. That they came into the year with two rookies in the CDL in Abe and Legend, and then Gwen has been in the CDL for 3 years, I think, before this. And Lunars had been in 1 year, not a full year because he came in
Yeah.
after the beginning of the season. And now we're about the halfway point of the Major 2 qualifiers, and they've already dropped both Legend and Abe. And not saying that their play was good enough to keep around necessarily, but we talked about it and we ranted about it that the reason that you sign Legend and Abe and Lunars even, Gwen, I think was very understandable. Any team, I think, would be pretty happy with signing him, even though he hasn't had a very good season either. But those three players who had a combined less than 1 year of experience in the CDL, we expected them to get a lot of time in this season. We expected at least, I think I even said until after the major two, after major two, is when you should really analyze this roster and kind of make your decision about who should stay and who should go, because this wasn't a championship level team in any respect, and but they because they needed all of the time, they need all the matches that they could get and all of the scrims, I'm sure, to get better and improve and work together and improve their chemistry. And now we're again nearing the halfway point of the Major 2 qualifiers, and both rookies have been dropped. I don't think Lunars is really in that much danger because he's been Vancouver's best player this year. So I don't know if Vancouver will make any further roster changes this season. It feels like you said, them bringing TJ and Cap back together. It feels like they're kind of set with this team, unless things just continue to fall out and they go winless. They've been like as good as you might expect a team that we both said was probably the one of the worst, if not the single worst team in the CDL to begin the year. But I think it is pretty damning that we're not even at the halfway point in the actual season, and they're already done with the two rookies. I should say though that you mentioned Abe was 54th in KD, and I looked on Breaking Point. There are 57 qualifying players. So I think 57 total players have played in the CDL this season. And 54th, of course, is Abe. He has a .84 KD overall. 55th is Slasher, who notably retired in
True series.
yeah. Okus, who has played 4 matches, I think, maybe. But
Something.
this is obviously his first stint in the CDL, so he has very limited experience. And then 57th and last is Legend, who was, of course, Abe's teammate. He had a .72. He got dropped. He had never played competitive COD before, or at least like major competitive COD before he got picked up by Vancouver. So, I'm not defending Abe and Legend's play necessarily, but I do think it is pretty interesting that things went so poorly and they constructed this roster so badly to start the year that we're in this position to begin with. So, yeah.
I I think, just looking at it objectively, there have been a lot of rookie players picked up over the years in the CDL, and obviously some have flourished into the stars we know today, while others have floundered and just completely flopped out of the CDL. And some have gotten second chances or third chances. Others have still waited for that next opportunity to showcase what they can do in the CDL. But just again, objectively, regardless of what you think of the roster construction of and who else Vancouver paired with these rookies, the fact that Vancouver had two rookies heading into this season, and they are both they are 2 of the 4 worst KDs so far in 2026. That's like, it's actually impressive and actually like, somewhat unlucky. Like just based on the success rate of, you know, rookies in the CDL, you would think at least one of them wouldn't be that low statistically. And again, we always say stats aren't everything at the end of the day. Clearly, we've talked about legend enough at this point that, there was more going on beyond just, the statistical performances and his lack of game knowledge and even whether he was set up to fail and everything. We've beaten that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beating the dead horse at that point. But it's pretty unlucky if you think about it that you go into a season and you're like, okay, we're gonna give 2 rookies a shot, and then both of them just like absolutely aren't able to cut it in this particular game in this season. Like that's super unfortunate for Vancouver.
Obviously, it's not the same kind of situation because Vancouver had the offseason to put together their roster, but it should be noted that C9 New York's current roster, 3 of those players are in the bottom 10 of KD as well. Nedra, Hyde, and Okus are all in the bottom 10. Hyde and Okus are in the bottom 6. So, yeah, I think it is unlucky, but I still think that if you're going to make that roster, if you're going to put that roster together, and we both agreed, like, that team was not good. The fact that Gwyn had triple the amount of experience in the CDL than anybody else on that team was like, okay, like, that's kind of crazy to really do. And then just for it to kind of fall apart immediately was, obviously just bad planning. But back to your point about the Bush and kind of where they go from here. This is like one of the biggest problems with challengers in general is that there is no like kind of, there might be a buyout on some of these challengers teams and all that, and they might get some money for a player getting picked up by a CDL team, but like it's not enough to even if they got something for cap, which I don't know if they did.
They should have because they got something. I think they got like 2,000 for TJ from Vancouver,
Okay.
and they made a video about it how like Vancouver didn't want to give like anything close to that, and then the one guy, who's basically like Dave Portnoy's assistant, it was like, the other guys were like, yeah, like a little wishy-washy. And he was like, no, we have a contract. This is what it says. They have to pay us the number in that contract. I'm pretty sure it was 2,000. I might have been off on it. And then they did something like at Major One. They actually went after like TJ got eliminated. They went out to dinner and they used his buyout money for the dinner, I believe.
Yeah. So like even 2,000 is basically nothing. Granted, that's like a tenth of the C9's roster salary, so maybe it's not nothing. But either way, like it is very little in return for like they're trying to win challengers champs. They're trying to win these challenger cups and the elite and the opens and all that. And granted, those aren't like big money events compared to what the CDL play for, especially at the end of the season. But those are like, it's just really not very much considering Capsidal and Spart have been 2 of the better challengers players just in total that they play on the same team. And now like within a week and a half of their team is gone for the Bush. So, and they have to kind of start over in that respect. Granted, this is not the first time, and I don't want to say that like, oh, poor Bush, and they're this is the first time this has ever happened in challengers. No, it happens literally every year, multiple times a year. Stallions, and probably the most famous example was FC Black when like every single week one of their players would get poached by a CDL team until it just stopped happening and that team just didn't exist anymore. But it does suck, and it does make you want a better system set up. So, the challengers teams expect something in return, that they do get something in return, and it's substantial enough that it kind of offsets the competitive downturn that they might have afterward because they don't have 2 really talented players with CDL experience leading their roster. And so like it is what it is, I guess. And we we don't really have like a great system set up, but it does feel like something could be done to better the system. So something like when this happens and Bush loses half their roster, that they are better compensated. And it feels like challengers teams and organizations that are funding these rosters, that they can feel like they're not kind of getting shafted in these deals, and that they don't feel like they have to leave the scene because they, can't compete, or they're losing money just funding these rosters. But yeah.
But that's my bigger overall concern with this, is that this wasn't a case, because this is Bush's very first year in competitive Call of Duty in any form, and it's obviously been a meteoric rise for them since the start of this year. But if you remember, like they were literally calling Daniel Ty, like Daniel to say at the start of the year, and we were joking about that, which we were calling him Daniel Say, and that was apparently wrong, so it's not much different. But then there was like the first event of the year, and they were like, like Jerry was tweeting at Daniel, like, why is there like a massive delay? And then you see Daniel give him a response, and it's like, okay, this is when like there's juice to this, and there's like some movement here that's getting attention, getting traction, getting the wheels turning, however you want to say it, and it is undeniable that they have had a large impact on just competitive Call of Duty in general this year. You could argue whether that would be the case if they had a team at the start of this year that wasn't winning any of these cups and whatnot. And now, if this team that after losing Cap and Spart isn't able to see that same success, what does it look like? Obviously, there will probably be like meltdown clips, like Jerry raging on Twitter and stuff, and that'll be funny and all good there. But like, how does it impact what the Bush want to do going forward, and how Barstool as a bigger whole looks at this? Because I could be wrong here, but I don't think any of the players are actually salaried for Bush or even like temp. There might be like a little bit of money there, but I'm pretty sure like the whole like deal with them was like, we're gonna do these watch parties, and we're gonna like blow you up on social media sort of thing, and that sort of interaction. I could be off on that, and things could have changed since the start of the year. Um, but still, it's a weird spot in terms of, I don't know what the expectation. Like, obviously, Bush and Bush fans have gotten these expectations now that they're going to go into every Challengers event and be one of the top teams. But after these roster moves, I don't know how those expectations shift, or if the fans even will shift those expectations. And then, like, worst case scenario, let's just say this team gets like a top 16, or some like absolutely bombs out in an event. Like, what does that mean? Like, we have less hours of the watch party. We got fans being like, what the hell is going on? And it's a you know, whole big domino effect from just like Capsidal going to Vancouver. So I definitely, I am slightly worried, but I do think in the long run, uh, Bush will be able to make it work in some capacity. I just don't know if this roster sees the same amount of success.
Yeah, but like you kind of mentioned, if Bush suck or have like these issues, then that could be better content in the end for Barstool just in general, is because you got Jersey Jerry losing his mind and trash talking their own players rather than being good, and not having much to talk bad about. But Jay Hearn in the YouTube chat said, I feel like they should have dropped 2 and go from there, talking about Vancouver. And he said, personally, Gwen, I said, it's the friendship league. If these guys want to be more competitive, they have to make those uncomfortable moves. I agree. Like, obviously this is a friendship league, and the CDL is like pre-CDL and all the way back to probably the beginning of COD. Guys play with who they want to play with, not necessarily who they should all the time. I will say in this specific case, Gwen has proven before the season that he is a very good player, probably the best, but obviously he was the most proven player for Vancouver before the year. They put a pretty horrendous and inexperienced team around him, and it, obviously he's performed even below those expectations, but I would just personally give him the benefit of the doubt because he has that experience and because you've seen him at his best. Whereas with like Lunars, this is probably the best that we've seen him, at least this season. Maybe not like this exact moment, but like he had a really rough rookie year, and he's looked better this year. So I think there's good to look at for Lunars. There's good to look at for Gwen in past years. we'll see what happens with Cap. TJ hasn't played like perfect or anything, and he hasn't been like a massive game changer for Vancouver. But again, like we just talked about it, Abe was performing under par as well. So I think there are a lot of factors with this team, and that goes back to the idea of like this roster was just really poorly constructed, and it just seems like now that we get to look back on it, they did think that they were going to be more competitive with that team, and I'm not sure what gave them that indication, because everything else kind of was screaming like there's no chance that this team is going to be able to win very many matches in the CDL. So I would let Gwen go, or not let him go, but let him continue on with this roster. Same with Lunars. See what happens with this Cap and TJ iteration, and then back together. But like if this doesn't work out, like you really don't have many options, and I don't know where you go from there. Like, is it maybe then it comes to Gwen or Lunars getting dropped? But I would drop TJ before I would drop either of those players, to be quite honest. So I guess we'll see as we move forward into the CDL season. Next up in the CDL, at least, was the Gentlemates being officially blacklisted by the rest of the CDL. They have been blacklisted for 1 week from scrims, and this was confirmed by multiple. Even I saw VOs confirm it as well. This was for snaking, and so they snaked in a scrim. I think VO said that it didn't really play any factor in the actual result of the scrim or have a major impact in general. But because they did it, the CDL teams decided, okay, like somebody's got to get punished here. And now Gentlemates have been out of the CDL scrims for the next week. JB Krez in the Twitch chat, he said mates were blacklisted in Toronto playing AMs because odd number of teams. So it is interesting. I cool, I guess. I don't know. Like, this is a weird situation. Obviously, we've talked about snaking probably almost 100 times on this show now, because we've said it before. Like, it's all fine and good to GA it, but as long as it is able to be done in real matches, it will continue to be done in real matches, because when shit is on the line and it matters, guys will resort to snaking. Look at Celium's literal entire career. Like, he is one of the greatest Call of Duty players, and yet he's done it more times than probably any other CDL player in official matches. And it's because that, when he kind of needs like an out, if he needs something to do to get out of a situation, he's going to snake, and that happens. And I'm glad that it's being punished in scrims. I don't know actually how much of an impact it will have on the actual matches, but what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I do think in the clip, at least the clip that was I put in the notes here that JP was allegedly responding to was Scrap watching the Gentlemates versus Cloud9 match where it happens, and Sib is snaking. It first off isn't the most egregious snaking I've ever seen. There's definitely been worse, but most noteworthy is it's happening on like a head glitch where there's nobody. Like, he didn't even shoot his gun. There was nobody challenging him or anything like that. So I do think that was a little interesting that was the punishment, and you could even say like if the CDL like footage wasn't, or the camera wasn't even on Sib, like you would argue nobody would even have known that it happened just because he didn't like shoot his gun or get in a gunfight or anything.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of Gentlemates, I am slightly concerned how the blacklist will impact them, because this is coming at a time after they had a pretty rough week
Yep.
last week. So not being able to practice after arguably one of the biggest upsets in CDL history and another loss to Toronto, how like will that be tilting enough to compound into more losses for Gentlemates? That's what I'll be interested to see how this impacts them and their preparation for their matches upcoming this week. But the other thing that went a little under the radar here, you mentioned with VOs tweeting about it, was that um, he said this was the case for Falcons and Surge earlier this season, and could just be me being out of the loop, but I feel like I didn't hear about it happening either time for them, for either Falcons or Surge. And I maybe it happened like so early in the year that I've already forgotten about it and just blocked it out. I don't really know. But I feel like in previous years, that's something we would have 1000% seen and heard on the timeline, and especially, Falcons, like, you feel like Pred or Cell would have had some comment about it. And, maybe for Vancouver, it flew under the radar because they were struggling and didn't really matter. But yeah, I thought that was a little interesting tidbit there that, this has happened multiple times already this season. This is the first we're hearing about it because it is Gentlemates and they won Major One. So, um, yeah, I think, we've talked about trying to police snaking and whatnot for years. Still seemingly no great answer to it, but if they are being consistent with this being the punishment for now, that's at least a sign and a step in the right direction. But overall, just the fact Gentlemates will not be getting any pro scrims this week after struggling last week in their matches has me interested to see how they'll perform this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that there is some kind of punishment and that that it isn't selective, because this would be a time in, like, you could imagine there being some like, well, it didn't actually matter, like this wasn't game breaking by any means, so like let's let it slide, let's give them a warning or whatever. But this is basically, they're saying like, I think they're kind of proving a point, like, hey, like this is not going to be accepted in any respect, in any case, no matter what impact or effect it actually has on a match. So here you go. Here's a week ban. If, I guess, to your point, if Gentlemates struggles this week, let's say they go 1-1, God forbid they go 0-2 because they do not have a good second match, or I guess a good second team to play their match against. But if they go 0-2, does that lead more teams to be like, oh shit, let's really make sure we're not snaking, because we just saw how bad it got for Gentlemates when they had a poor week and then they didn't have anybody to scrim and then they have another bad week. Does it scare teams into basically complying in the future? Again, I still think if it's a game 5 round 11, especially in a big tournament or something, I think people would do it because it's worth the risk in that respect. But I do think it could have an impact. I just don't know if it will, but I guess Gentlemates is a good test subject for that. And it's a bad time for this to come around, like you mentioned, to go 0-2, to have one of the worst losses in history, and then not be able to scrim any of the 11 CDL teams is pretty bad. But I guess we'll see this week what actually happens. Only other news before we actually get into the matches is probably the weirdest news of them all. Ghost of Hope, who we've talked about before, he's leaked some things or reported some things about, I guess many things about Call of Duty in general over the years, and we've talked about some of those things. He basically said that he was sent a cease and desist letter by Activision, and he's complying with it. This was seems like a very broad cease and desist, but I'll just read what he said on Twitter last night. He said, Activision has legally demanded that I stop leaking and disseminating confidential information related to Call of Duty / Activision, and I am complying with their demands. Still going to stick around and chat about official Call of Duty info and anything not related to leaks / confidential information. Cheers for these past few years. So I don't think Ghost of Hope considers himself a journalist by chance. I think he's more like informal and just kind of leaks things that he hears about. But I would really like to see the cease and desist letter that he got sent and what specifically that they were threatening legal action with, because a lot of this stuff, like, one, if he's not under an NDA, he's not breaking any law. He's not doing anything improper. They can think that it's cheap or whatever, but it really doesn't matter what they think in these circumstances. And I wonder what specifically he leaked that I know he's had his fair share of beefs with Call of Duty, but I wonder if there was something specific that they got really mad about to actually send this letter, because this is just a very weird reaction. Not saying that big multi-billion-dollar corporations don't try to, flex their muscles and use like their legal resources to shout down like leakers or journalists or whoever that they don't want to be spreading information about them. But this is a really very bizarre reaction from Activision. What was your kind of take on this?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we don't know the manner in which Ghost of Hope obtains his information and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, there could be some like, I mean, I don't know anything about that data mining or how you even go about that, but obviously, if there's any like trying to hack files involved or anything like that, I'm not accusing Ghost of Hope of doing that, but I'm just throwing it out there because, like I said, I have no idea how he gets his stuff, and obviously if it's just from like talking to people at Activision, then that's like an entirely different thing. But just important to point that out, that it feels like there could be some stuff that the way in which he obtains his information could be an issue for Activision, but that's pure speculation.
Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest takeaway from me is it feels like this is like the ultimate like seal of approval for Ghost of Hope, in the sense of like Activision, by doing this, is basically being like, yeah, this guy is basically everything he said is right, and we want to stop him from leaking stuff that's actually right, especially when a lot of the stuff he has leaked has led to negative reactions to a lot of like what's upcoming in Call of Duty and potential next games, and you know like the themes and the plans for those games and whatnot. A lot of that stuff he's leaked has been like, oh, they're gonna do a copy of this previous game, or they're gonna do this that was in a previous title, and a lot of people rage, and it gets views, and when that gets loud enough, it's obviously gotten to the point where Call of Duty's just like, yeah, we don't want to deal with this anymore. So I would be interested to hear exactly what is because I feel like people get sent cease and desists all the time, and they're just like, okay, like they crumple it up and throw it out, and they don't care, and they go about their day. I even saw some people like tweeting online. I forget what it was, but they were basically using like synonyms for ghost and hope, and it was like, I can't wait to see the leaks from the Phantom of Optimism or something like that. Or it's like this guy could just change his name, make a new account, and like leak from that. But obviously those were jokes. I don't know. I think my biggest takeaway from this was that this is a seal of approval for what Ghost of Hope has leaked, and it's going to look even worse for Call of Duty if the stuff that he's leaked most recently ends up turning out to be true. That's going to be a massive PR shitstorm. And the other segment of this that was super weird was just the Call of Duty official Twitter account like acknowledging it and replying to a tweet from T Dog Smitty, uh, and I, I don't know, that was just a super weird tweet to see from the quote unquote official Call of Duty Twitter account. It's almost got 1 million views now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. This is just really odd. They've done this a few times now, like somewhat recently, where they come out publicly and talk about these leaks and like try to refute them, even though they're not refuting them. Because, like, I mean, the big one was that didn't he say that Sledgehammer was going to develop the next COD game, and then that they're not allowed to do back-to-back MW games or Black Ops games? Wasn't that what they refuted, or what they came out and denied most recently?
I don't
Or
remember if the sledgehammer part was it, but I mean, it was reported by someone that from going forward, they're not going to do like consecutive Modern Warfares or consecutive Black Ops anymore. I don't remember if that was specifically Ghost of Hope or not, but it probably was it.
yeah, but either way, he had leaked something quite big in the most recent past, and he had been tweeting even as of March 2nd about like how Activision was pretty stupid. So I'll just read some recent tweets. These are all from March 2nd, the day before he got his his cease and desist letter. He said the idea of $1 billion studio changing their entire design philosophy for their next game because a leaker leaked their game would be dog shit. And it got 5K likes and millions of views on twitter.com. 2 tweets later, he said, so sad that this $1 billion company is always on the defensive after Black Ops 7 and are trying to shut down any shit that goes viral that doesn't help their agenda because they're scared. The very next tweet was him talking about how he got his cease and desist letter. This is just absolutely insane to actually think about. Again, like you said, if he was getting his information improperly, if he had access to, like he basically was inside their Slack or whatever it is that they use to talk about, and like he obtained that information in an improper way, then sure, you could understand it. I don't like. I understand if he is just like, he got the cease and desist letter, and even if he did nothing wrong, he's just like, I don't want to deal with this shit. Like, this isn't worth the stress that it might come with. I can understand that, but I do want him to speak publicly just to clarify exactly what they're asking of him and like how he got his information. And so we understand the full scope of this, because like this is really just them trying to silence one of the more well-known critics and leakers in their community. And at a time when Call of Duty is not doing so hot, like we just saw with Black Ops 7, that the sales were not great by their standards, even if the reception was all right, their overall reception of the series over the past 5 years, for example, has not been great. I was just being charitable with the 5 years. It's been much, much longer than that. But I think it's very interesting. We're also in a new era with Activision because it is now owned by Microsoft, and previously it was an independent company who had this really strong relationship with Sony and PlayStation. So there are, I guess, some changing tides in Activision, and I wonder how much of the takeover by Microsoft has led them to kind of change their philosophy about reacting to these things, because like you said, they put out that tweet in replies said, even when leaks are wrong, they still hurt the people building the game and mess with player expectations. Shut the fuck up. Oh my God, you're so annoying. Like, make a good game. Make a good game once every 5 years and you can start talking. Like, dude, you've put out Black Ops games every 3 years for the last like 15. Like, get over yourself, man. Like, you don't, this company is just so ridiculous. I'm not saying you should harass developers. I'm not saying that you should leak personal information about these people or whatever. I'm not saying any of that, but they deserve criticism. They've earned that criticism. That, like, if he's not doing anything wrong by leaking these things in the way that he obtained the information, again, like leaking, people always look down on it. People look down on reporting and all that. As two journalists, people with like journalism majors, we're not going to like be saying that, journalism is bad here on this show. Like, this is not going to happen. But like, again, like if he obtained the information in a really dirty way, which we don't know, then like, this is ridiculous. This is basically him, the company saying that they got butthurt by things that he was saying and or that he was correctly leaking, and that makes them look bad, not him. So, and it's not like I don't even think I follow Ghost of Hope. I don't really like look. I'm not like, there's no tabs open just when he tweets to make sure like I'm up to date. But like I think that this is a broader problem in like corporate society that they get really mad about these things. I mean, you go back and you look at OpTic when they make roster changes or whatever, and the reporters who report those roster changes get shit on by their fans because they're like, how dare you take this away from us? And it's like, dude, that's not their job. Their job is not to be PR. And again, they can do that. I think they can hold on to that information. I think very notably, like some journalists did not report about Octane retiring when he retired or before he retired because they didn't want to like ruin that announcement. And I can understand that. That is up to the journalists whether they want to make that decision or not. But this is just a completely different situation, and this is really a really bad look for Activision when they tend to always do these things. They always make themselves look bad one way or the other. So. Anything else before we get into the matches?
Good rant,
and good capital J journalism rant on today's Ego Chall podcast. Let's get into the matches. We're on week 4 of the Major 2 qualifiers. We're we're about to enter just over halfway period in these Major 2 qualifiers, which are the longest, of course, 11 matches for each of these 12 CDL teams. And we're starting on Friday, March 6th, starting with the absolute banger of all bangers, the Vancouver Surge, the new look Vancouver Surge versus C9 New York. C9 coming off of first a massive upset win over the Paris Gentlemates to start last week, and then got their doors blown off by by Miami, if I'm not mistaken. And then Vancouver is they still have to lose one more match before they're legally required to win their match. So I will go with C9 here.
Wow. All right. So there are several matches this week I wasn't confident in picking before you gave your pick, and so I'm gonna kind of gauge my picks based on that. But consequently or ironically, it's 2 the C9 matches are up there, and it's just I guess that the Gentlemates match has me thinking, and we talked about it last episode in the sense of the search and destroy for a new team is they should, in theory, Cloud9 should have an edge in search and destroy, at least against Vancouver here, who is going to have limited practice with Capsidal. The only reason I'm sort of doubting that, though, is because of the previous experience with TJ and Capsidal playing together, and obviously TJ and Gwyn had previous experience together on Carolina, and that seemingly didn't make much of a difference. But Capsidal is a pretty good S&D player. God, this is tough, dude. I can't believe. I mean, in all seriousness, this match could make or break which of these teams doesn't make Major 2, right?
Yeah.
So
they might both miss it, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with Vancouver. I think Cloud9 has an edge in the search and destroy. But I do think because of Capsidal being the player in particular who's coming in and his search and destroy background, that might cancel it out a little bit, but I guess we'll see what happens.
I actually think Vancouver is the better team, but I'm just kind of memeing because they have to lose 3 matches. So, and if I was just picking with my brain, I would say Vancouver, but I don't think that you can look at either of these teams and feel like incredibly confident. I just would feel a little more confident with the Surge because we've seen them beat Boston twice, for example, and like C9, like I really don't know if that Gentlemates win was some kind of indication of what we should expect from them. Like not obviously beating top teams necessarily, but just beating any team. I don't know if that's the case. I think that might have just been a confluence of factors of like C9 plays like pretty well for them. Paris plays awful, and like, shit happens in Call of Duty. I think that's kind of what happened, but this will be a good test for that. I really don't know. But yeah, I'll go with C9. You're going to go with Vancouver. Next up, we actually have a good match, a very interesting one. LAT versus FaZe. FaZe coming in on a losing streak. Of course, we talked about it was only the third time in their history that FaZe had lost 3 or more matches, and it could be 4 matches here. I will go with FaZe. I think this is an interesting. This is like we talked about it a little bit last week, but if FaZe, they have a horrible, really hard week this week. If they lose both these matches, a roster change does seem a lot more likely than it did even a week ago. So I'll go with FaZe, but certainly could see a LAT win here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with LAT. I can't pick FaZe right now just based on what we've seen from them. I do think there is a chance that the performance from last week lit a fire under their ass, and they know who they're playing up against this week. You got Draza against Scrap, and Draza as the OpTic CEO later in the week. So maybe this is Draza's big week to shine and show his potential again. We already had earlier this season where the roster change stuff was started to being talked about during the holiday break. Then Draza comes back and is dropping like 1.3s and have nobody's talking about it anymore. So maybe that's all he needs to get the wheels turning again. And I am just really excited to see this match. I think another good test for Neum and Neum in this roster and how they can operate against a top team. But I'll go with LAT.
Yeah, I think these teams are 1-1 in their first 2 matches. They played. Pretty sure this was their first match for FaZe this season, and they lost that match. And then they played at Major 1. It was a 3-0 win for FaZe. That was in the losers bracket. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's again, like if FaZe loses this one, I think a 1-1 week is going to be a real struggle for FaZe just because of the teams that they play. But if LAT wins, this is definitely the biggest win that they've had since Neum came into the roster. Finishing up on Friday, Miami versus G2. I would go with Minnesota here. Miami has looked. G2 has not been the most consistent team by any means, but G2 has looked a little more consistent than Miami, who they upset FaZe a few weeks ago, but we talked about it on the last show. Who knows what that win actually meant, considering the way that FaZe looked last week. G2 has also beaten FaZe quite a few times, and they went 1-0 last week, so this would be kind of continuing a good string of matches for them, so I'll go with Minnesota.
Yeah, give me G2 here. I just think the Miami had a good win against Cloud9, but that's to be expected unless you're gentle mates for whatever reason. So I just think G2 have done it a little more against better competition right now, and I'll go with G2.
Then we go to Saturday, March 7th, another G2 match, G2 Minnesota versus the Paris Gentlemates. Again, Paris, like we said earlier, coming in off of no scrims against CDL teams because of the blacklisting. Also coming in off of back-to-back losses. I will go with Paris. Obviously they've looked way worse than G2 has recently, but Paris is defending major champions. I'm just going to chalk up last week as a bad week, something that's not going to be repeated this week. So I'll go with Paris.
Yeah, very interesting match here. I'm going to go with G2. I do think the lack of scrims this week could have an impact on Gentlemate's preparation for this match. At the same time, I do, similar to what I was saying with Draza, like that could be the thing that lights fire under Gentlemates again and gets them performing up to what we saw from them at Major 1. So this could be a bit of a trap match for G2, especially if they show any signs of weakness against Miami, or if they lose to Miami, then going into this match, it could be a tough showdown for them. But I'll take G2 to go 2-0 this week, which I did a lot last year with Minnesota, and it didn't work out for me. So expecting it to blow up in my face this week too.
Yeah, G2 has been on a string of Game 5 wins as of recently. I think 2, but when you've only won 3 all season, that's a string. And also, I believe that these two teams played in the Major 1 qualifiers, and Genomates won 3-2 if I'm not mistaken. So I think that was another one of G2's like close losses because I think they did it with OpTic a few times and then Paris as well. So this is a really tough series when Genomates was winning. I think it might be even tougher when they're on a losing streak. So we'll see on Saturday. Next up is OpTic versus FaZe. Yeah. I'm gonna go with OpTic. FaZe, I might pick them against LAT, but LAT has not looked unstoppable by any means. OpTic, on the other hand, has looked really good. Aside from that like 2-week period to end the Major 1 qualifiers, they've been kind of lights out. So definitely go with OpTic.
Yeah, I gotta pick OpTic. Like I said, I couldn't pick them couldn't pick FaZe against LAT. I can't pick them against OpTic the way OpTic's been playing. So I'm going with FaZe to go 0-2 this week, which every other week in these qualifiers I picked them to go 2-0 and they haven't. So maybe me picking them 0-2 will get them to go 2-0. Who knows?
I don't know if you've ever picked FaZe to go 0-2 in any week, probably.
Probably not.
Next up, we have Toronto versus Falcons. So Toronto went 2-0 and 6-0 last week, and Falcons did not have their greatest week. I'm not convinced that Toronto is all the way back, but this would be a good step in the right direction, I would say. But I still don't feel very confident in them, so I'll go with the Falcons.
All right, I'll go with Falcons too. This was one of the other matches I wasn't super confident in, and we talked about it last episode. The whole Den situation, like seemingly being what we've seen the most since Kips joined this roster. I feel like with this specific match, Clay is the type of guy to like notice that and not let it slip through the cracks. So I'm fully expecting, unless without looking at Falcons numbers, like maybe they ego chal him on one Den in the series, but I wouldn't be surprised if Falcons just like try to veto out Den and play Toronto on some of these other maps, and I think that might give Falcons an edge here. So I'll go with Falcons, but definitely interested to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, I think Toronto has a 9-map winning streak because they have 3-0'd 3 consecutive teams, and then they lost to LAT in their first match with Kips. So,
and 7 of those 9 wins were on Den.
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty interesting one. A lot of interesting match actually this week. And then the last one on Saturday is C9 versus Boston. So Boston has lost to Vancouver twice, but then also beat teams like who they beat FaZe most recently. Yeah, I'll go with Boston, I guess. I mean, I don't really have a good reason for that necessarily because I picked C9 against Vancouver, and Vancouver again has beaten Boston. But yeah, I mean, you don't really have to use logic when you pick Boston Breach matches anyway.
Yeah, I was going back and forth on this one, but Boston just has a more talented roster, regardless of what I think about Boston as a team.
Mm-hmm.
They should win this match, and I'll pick Boston.
Sunday, March 8th, starting off of Miami versus LAT. Definitely going to go with the Thieves.
Yeah, LAT here for sure. Interesting. Yeah, this might be. Well, no. What was it? Major 3 when there was the drama with Super and Scrap.
Yeah, I think so.
Like the Scrap flipped him off and Super like hit it into his face or whatever. So I think they played after that last year, but regardless, this might be one of the first times we've seen that matchup, and obviously there was we learned after the fact that drama was more directed towards Envoy. Ironically, I don't think we mentioned this last episode. Like Super saw like Envoy talking about challengers, like a lack of talent in challengers nowadays or something like that, and now Envoy just this past week lost a match to a full team of challengers when they lost to Cloud9, but yeah, regardless, I think LAT beats Miami.
Toronto versus Boston. I mean, if I'm not picking Toronto in the first one, but like I definitely am picking them here. And if they go from 9 straight map wins to losing to Boston this week, then literally there's no way to correctly predict them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm going with Toronto too.
OpTic versus Carolina. Go OpTic.
Yep.
And then finishing off with Vancouver Surge versus the Paris Gentlemen. So again, as the theory goes, Vancouver must lose 3 matches to earn 1 win. They enter this week with a 2-match losing streak. They play C9 in the first one. If I'm correct and C9 wins, then that will make 3 straight losses for Vancouver heading into their match against Paris, who just lost to C9 last week. I will say that Vancouver will not repeat it because the Capsidal stuff.
Oh.
No, I can't. I cannot, in good faith, pick Vancouver over Paris, regardless of how bad the Gentlemen have been.
Yeah, I'll go with Gentlemen here, but again, I have the same mindset, especially if Vancouver comes out hot, honeymoon phase against Cloud9 to kick off the week, and Gentlemates look flat after the lack of pro practice this week. This could be a bit of a trap game, and Preston's streak could continue in that sense, but I'll pick Gentlemates here regardless.
I want to look up because TJ joined the team, and I know that they won. I think in that first week with him.
Correct.
But I don't know if it was the first match or the second match. I know they beat Boston. The first match?
Maybe it wasn't actually, if you're saying it was the 3 streak.
Because I'm trying to look it up.
Well, no, I'm thinking of Carolina only played 2 matches before the break. So I think Vancouver might have played 3. I think Carolina was the only team that played 2 matches.
Yeah, so Vancouver, I know they lost. So they lost their first 3 matches of the season. But I'm trying to look up. So TJ joined on January 9th. And so their first match after January 9th, if my phone will load quick enough, was January 10th, and they beat Boston. So maybe that is something we're overlooking in this, is that the first match with this new roster will be a win, and then they'll restart it and lose 3 straight matches after that. So really, the theory is to be tested again here this week. So we'll see. Pick them so far this season. You're 56-37. I am 60-33. Did you pick Carolina at all? They only have 1 match, so that no.
They only got 1 match against OpTic.
All right, we'll circle back next week, see if you continue not pick Carolina. Yeah. So and Trimmer is still winless. I forgot to mention that part. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on pretty much everything: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. I think we're at like 285 subscribers or thereabout. Yep. So you could watch the live stream either on YouTube, and then you can also watch the VOD there, or you can watch the live stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Please follow and subscribe there. You can also follow and subscribe to Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/jbink with 2Ks. Same Twitter, jbink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcasters at Ego Chall Podcast. And we're targeting the show to be on Sunday, March 8th, or after the matches are done. So usually like 9 p.m. Eastern-ish. Depends on when the matches are done. It really depends. Maybe a little bit earlier, a little bit later, but either way, Sunday evening is what we're targeting to talk about all of these matches for the upcoming week of CDL action. And then, if there's any news, like Vancouver officially announcing Capsidal on their roster, so maybe we'll talk about it then. But I think that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support. Shout out Jay Hearn for stopping by in the YouTube chat earlier today. He's been a regular in the chat. I recognize his name, so appreciate the support. And yeah, like you mentioned, I do think it's been a little strange, the Sunday episodes for us, because it's 4 matches on Sunday now. I keep thinking we're not going to be able to do the show until like 10 o'clock if there's like longer series, but there's just happened to have been a lot of fast series on these Sundays so far that have let us go live a little earlier than maybe we would have if there were any delays or whatnot. So either way, we'll be live at some point on Sunday, hopefully, after the matches end, and can't wait to talk about it all with you guys. Thank you for all the support, and hope you enjoyed today's show. I think we got a good weekend of matches ahead, and that should give us plenty to talk about on Sunday. And yeah, till then, thank you as always, and remember to send the chow.